And so from abundant life, how did that then evolve and develop? Because again, I mean, there's that word, but I think initially nobody really believes that, you know, there is now an apostolic word.
No, I didn't even know what it meant when he said it.
Had to find out what apostolic
And so you try to, and you can't pursue a title. You have to walk in what God's given you. You're busy working with a little church called Abundant Life. You're doing what you do, and you do what you feel you're convinced and convicted of.
Yeah.
And family gets developed, and now this thing is growing, and it's changing, and people get connected. To tell us a bit
So
more.
what happened out of that, it grew to one or two other little ones in the southeast of England, and we would gather together meet those places. Every month we'd get together for what we call leadership today, but we get together for a corporate life, 1 month for sports day together and 1 month for input. So we were living life because God was teaching us the church is family, not a structure and all that kind of thing.
Yes, that's important.
Yeah.
That's because that's what so much of the emphasis is on, again.
Is on family.
That's right.
So we believe structure from family, not relation, not the other way around.
Yes.
And so one day into my life walked a young man from South Africa called Ron Robertson.
Yeah.
And he'd been in a meeting in Johannesburg and heard a man who I was beginning to relate with him and another man with him in DC, just very little bit, and he was another one who had a word there about what I had to do as well. And so Ron heard this message in Johannesburg about discovering church in a new way, living church life in a new way, and he was a Methodist lay preacher. And of course he was great friends with Dave Cape. They all were in the Methodist lay preachers. When I first met Dave Cape, he was just a long-haired singer in a little Christian rock band running a print shop. He wasn't a foot washer in those days.
With his little red-haired girlfriend.
Yeah, with a red-headed girlfriend and wife then. Anyhow, so we grew up from early days together. But what happened, Ron took time off from his carpet business and took a 3 or 6 month trip around the world looking, what is this? And someone said to him before he left South Africa, you're not going to find what you're looking for until you meet a guy called Tony Fitzgerald. Well, we had a little church then of about 15, 20, I don't know, we grew up to a couple of hundred in that first church for a while there. So probably around that time. But anyhow, he eventually arrived. He went all the way through where all the Meccas are, you know, Tulsa and Dallas, and a little camper van driving across, gets to DC where the guys are relating, eventually gets to England and goes through in the organisation that we've been connected with, a DTS there, Discipleship Training School.
Yeah.
And then we're having a little men's meeting in a pizza shop, which we owned, downtown
Yes.
in Croydon. He walked in one day and he just said, are you Tony Fitzgerald? I said, yes, I'm Ron Robertson, pleased to meet you. Don't know who you are. But in the long and the short of it, he told me the story. He finished the school, then moved in with Marilyn and I, and him and Anne. And
Van and Kimmy.
Kimmy was alive then, their oldest daughter. Moved in with us, and for a few weeks we just talked about discovering church, and he wrote a book that we released not long at his memorial, at his sad passing, on rediscovering church.
Yes.
And which I've still got a few copies of.
Yes.
And so he went back to South Africa and he said, when I get someone else who will believe what we're talking about, I'll send for you. And so months went by and I got a call from him. I mean, we had some communication. He said, I've got one other couple added to me. We're flying you down. And we flew down, Marilyn and I. And so Johannesburg really became the third or fourth church.
Yes.
And we started this series of healing meetings and different things, and in a hall. But it first started off in the upstairs floor of his house. And we'd have 70 or 80 people packed in there, and we just couldn't stop what God was doing.
That's also when the poster said, flying in from England, Apostle Tony Fitzgerald.
That's right. He picks me up at the airport. We drive into Randburg, you know, and I saw these big posters on the side. Conference at such and such a place, Tony Fitzgerald speaking on apostles and prophets. I looked at Marilyn in the back of the car and said, we've got a few hours to learn what that even means, you know. So, but we went in, a few of us rattling in the hall, and we started there. And then for about 2 years, sometimes I'd fly down from England just for the weekend. I'd leave Friday night, get in Saturday, do a seminar all day, meet with the church Sunday morning, doing baptism, set in elders. We always have a braai, of course. You can't come to South Africa without a braai. Then meet with Ron and whoever was around then in the evening, fly back late Sunday night, be back in my office in England Monday morning. Did that often. Not now. Then I was Then I was young and stupid, but now I'm no longer young. But as we say, but it was just a wonderful time. I mean, we saw everything, as you know, some of the story without pointing, but literally what was raising from the dead, new life, to tremendous healings, to all kinds of things taking place. And precious other leaders here in South Africa, every time I came, I'd always, if I was here for longer than just those weekend trips, I'd always meet with good men in this country, like Ray McCauley and Dudley Daniels at that time. We were all beginning at the same time up in Joburg. We'd always have lunch together, pray for one another and believe for one another.
Yes.
And so early we got an understanding of the whole body here, you know, and things like that. And they were precious, precious times. And then it wasn't long after that I had my first trip down to the PE area and then the Jeffreys Bay area.
Yes.
And of course, out of all that, you guys came in, and I mean, you've been here really from the very earliest journey. I mean, if you look back at who are the foundations that way of Church of the Nations, those earliest ones is like Dave and Carol, Marilyn and I, and you two. You know, we're the earliest of what has become the Apostolic Council and that now. And so it was growing. So it was that was 79 we started, and at about 81, 82 we came down here. In 89, all of us then decided that we'd have this conference in Bognor Regis in England, and every 10 years God seems to take us another stage, and it was there that we decided we'd come under one name, and that anthem of the nations was written.
Yes.
That's
And
right.
we felt God say to us, I don't mind you having one name as long as it's nothing else but to identify a family.
That's right.
Yes.
If there's ever the thing you worship or the thing that gives you your, but just to identify family.
Or even some vague form of a specific structure that
No.
that will
Not a
dictate.
denomination, nothing
That's
at
not
all.
the reason.
So we made a decision, even with the name, nothing would hold us together other than love and family. Everything else that we have with us all comes out of that. So 89 we came under that name, and then we've grown then to become a family of clusters that we are now. So every apostolic gift could get released for their expression of apostolic life, to build a family with them, and then us to keep our unity amongst that diversity, to keep the family of Church of the Nations. So that's the way it multiplied. And very quickly, after Mara and I moved to the States, we went to Richmond to live. We've been there 26 years now. But when we arrived in Richmond to live, I think Church of the Nations was in 5 nations or 6 nations, and within 4 years we were in 26.
Wow.
And that was just after we made the decision to go to clusters. We went through that explosion of
So
nations.
just explain that again. Clusters simply meaning that it will not be overseen or governed by one group, but that it'll become a family of apostolic clusters.
Yeah, I felt from day one what Church of the Nations should never ever be something that ends up at a point with an apostle or leader or someone sitting at the top. It should be a flat top where every gift could be continually multiplied, and we wouldn't have to explode in the end by making room for everyone. Everyone would be released at the right time. I mean, not just any time, but released. And that's when, like Edna was saying before, we began to understand the journey of being a child, a son, then a father, out of Isaiah. And then God gave us those words as we developed there, like that became the life-changing one for me, except for the Isaiah scripture, when Jesus said to the Father, I've completed the work that you've sent me to do. And I realized that he said that to the Father before he went to the cross. And if I had been asked up till then, what did Jesus come to do? I would have said to go to the cross, die, set people free from sin. But Jesus said to the Father, I've completed the work you've sent me to do, before he went to the cross. And I asked myself, what was that he had to do? And the next verses he said, the men you gave me out of the world, here they are ready.
Right.
Now I can go to the cross and release people because I've got kingdom leaders ready to lead. And so that, in all of its thing, became the foundation of it.